right, guys. So I watched Creature Commandos, and it was a really good episode. Um, yeah. So this one focused on GI Robot, and yeah, it's kind of what I said in the last episode, or yeah, last week when I reviewed the first two episodes, where I was like, okay, the first episode was good. I liked it, but it was kind of, felt like James Gunn going through the motions of the Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy. But I thought that the second episode is very strong, and I was like, hey, if they can go back and give us the backstory of all the characters like they did The Bride, then I think this can turn out to be something pretty special. And yeah, I really liked what they did with G.I. Robot's backstory. So they kind of talk about how he's essentially, I would say, an allegory to like a soldier with PTSD, right? Because he is essentially a robot that is his like prime directive is I'm killing Nazis in World War II. That's like literally the only thing that I'm good for and that my life's purpose is for. And he finds like camaraderie among his soldiers and whatnot, and that's where he's comfortable. And then when the war's over and like there's not really anything else to do when it comes to World War II, he's not really compatible with life outside of it. He doesn't have like the mental faculties to adapt to a post-war life. And I think that all of that is pretty obviously, right? Like what am I saying? What I'm trying to say? Yeah, an allegory to a soldier with PTSD. Now, something that I thought was actually super interesting in regards to G.I. Robot's backstory is I'm pretty sure this character here is Sergeant Rock. Now, they never explicitly call that character Sergeant Rock, but G.I. Robot mentions that Sergeant Rock was a part of his like battalion or whatever. And I looked up a picture of Sergeant Rock on Google, and he has a little hard hat. So I'm pretty sure that guy is Sergeant Rock. And for people that don't know, it was reported that Luca Guadagnino, he's the guy that directed Challengers, which is actually my current favorite movie of the year. He also directed the movie Queer, which I have not seen yet. And apparently Daniel Craig, who is like the main character in Queer, he plays the main character, is going to play Sergeant Rock in Luca Guadagnino's film. So when I initially heard about it, I was like, this is a bizarre choice to make a DC Studios movie about a soldier in World War II, but I was like, surely this is going to be like an Elseworlds project, right? And I also thought that it was weird that Luca Guadagnino would want to direct it, but it seems like maybe that movie actually is going to be in the DCU, because they're like low key teasing it and like teeing it up here in Creature Commandos. So yeah, like I'm starting to think that that Sergeant Rock movie is going to be a DCU movie, and I would assume that we're going to see GI Robot in it, which is actually kind of cool. Like again, Creature Commandos is doing a really good job at world building and like making me like excited for the future of the DCU, which I got to be real and honest, right? The MCU is not really doing for me right now. Like we haven't even finished the first project of the DCU, and I'm already like fantasizing and thinking about what's to come more than I currently am like at all with the MCU. Like I genuinely do not care about the multiverse at this point. Like I read the headline that Chris Evans is coming back in Avengers Doomsday. It genuinely did nothing for me. That does not excite me whatsoever. But low key, watching an episode of Creature Commandos, really growing to like GI Robot, really growing to like, their like version of World War II. And now I am all of a sudden interested in that Sergeant Rock movie, interested to see GI Robot come back in that movie. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. I think they also continue to do a good job with Nina and GI's relationship. It obviously makes the end of the episode all the more tragic, but I really like that. That like the other thing that I should say about the about GI Robot is that they also like low-key touch on like artificial intelligence and whether or not like robots are humans, because they touched on the fact that they consider GI Robot to be a human when it came to sentencing him after he killed all the, you know, all the neo-Nazis and whatnot. Um and there's also that moment where the doctor is like asking GI Robot what he desires. As a like aside from his prime directive, and he clearly had like genuine kinship with his battalion or whatever. So yeah, like they did a really good job of like humanizing of humanizing GI Robot, and like also explaining where robotics is at in the DCU and all of that. I've also heard some people talking about on where did I see it? Did I see it on Twitter? Probably Twitter. That I guess the Doctor is like somebody like prominent in DC Comics. I think he makes the Metal Men, I think I saw somebody say, which is like a group in the comics or something. I don't know. Like they're also apparently world building in that way, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and then obviously they do the whole thing with the neo-Nazis, and I got to say I actually appreciated how they handled this neo-Nazi that like adopts GI Robot, because here's the thing, and I want to be careful with how I with how I explain my perspective here. Obviously, Nazis bad. I think most of us can agree on that. But I think that it's important to also like not dehumanize them, right? Like I think it's important to understand how people in 2024 get radicalized, right? How they're not all like mustache twirling, you know, villains. A lot of them are people like this neo-Nazi guy that is probably, you know, just like dejected, right? He's, you know, his life was turned around when he broke his leg. He's lonely. He's probably like an incel of some type because he's living alone with a bunch of cats. And he probably feels like completely ostracized by society. And it's a lot of people like that get drawn into these extremist movements. And, you know, that's how they're drawn into thinking that a certain group of people are the reason why the world is destroyed, right? You have like the Andrew Tate people, right? That are like, that hate themselves and hate their lives. And they're like, well, Andrew Tate is telling me that it's all women's fault. And to be fair, Andrew Tate is also telling you that it's the Jews' fault. He's also doing that. It's the women, it's the Jews. And in reality, like you know, and yes, and just to be clear, yes, Nazi bad. Nazis are bad. And it's fine to say that. It's okay to say that. But if that's where your analysis ends, if that's all you do in order to try to combat, you know, neo-Nazism, then I don't think that you're doing really the world any favors, to be quite honest with you. I actually appreciated the fact that James Gunn was willing to humanize a neo-Nazi and just show that they're not all like, you know, like Hitler. You know what I mean? It's a lot of it is people that feel rejected by society. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was like an interesting thing to point out about this episode. Yeah, obviously the big question at the end of the day is GI Robot actually dead? I mean, it is interesting because James Gunn, I heard him say in an interview that one of the things that he feels differentiates Creature Commandos from the Suicide Squad and from Guardians of the Galaxy is that the deaths and the characters, or the deaths of the characters, are apparently going to not feel like good, or they're not going to feel like heroic or satisfying. And there was like, because like I will say one criticism that I actually have of the Suicide Squad is that like you have a bunch of characters that get killed off at the beginning, and then after the very beginning of the movie, the only character that gets like a death that's like kind of shocking in the way that it happens is Polka Dot Man. And I feel like that's kind of a betrayal of what the promise of the Suicide Squad is, where in the I feel like the promise of the Suicide Squad is throughout the movie, people are just going to be dying like on a dime. These are villains. Their lives are meaningless. That's why we're sending them out on this mission. So I think that James Gunn is kind of following through on his promise here. So I think it's actually possible that G.I. Robot is dead. And it was an unceremonious death, right? Like the Queen just blew him up and we just moved right along, because that's how death happens sometimes. It's unceremonious, right? Like his arc isn't resolved. He's not, he's not going to develop a future friendship with Nina and whatnot. He's not going to find his humanity. He's not going to find a true meaning. He is going to die as he lived, being used by the government as a weapon of mass destruction. And it doesn't feel good, but that's just how life is sometimes. That's kind of how James Gunn has talked about it. So as of right now, I don't think G.I. Robot is coming back. Like, obviously he could at some point, right? Because he's a robot and they could like salvage his brain and rebuild him. But as of right now, I'll take James Gunn at his word. And I think that the deaths in this are probably going to be permanent. And I don't know, that's where I'm at the moment. The other thing that I kind of wanted to point out about the show, I actually think the editing is in the first 2 episodes as well, but I wanted to point it out here. I think it's really cool. Like all there are a lot of like really neat transitions. The one I'll call out from this episode is when like they're showing his backstory and the way that it transitions into modern day. Very similar, or kind of similar to how they did The Bride, showing her backstory and, when she's having sex with Dr. Frankenstein and like, and it like transitions into fucking Cersei beating the shit out of her. I liked how they transitioned from G.I. Robot killing all the neo-Nazis to G.I. Robot killing all the like incel guys in modern day. I thought that was all that it was all good. Like the editing in this show is actually very strong, and the pacing I quite enjoy. Another thing when it comes to like action, damn, like Weasel and Phosphorus, they went crazy. You know what I mean? Like it was like kind of unhinged seeing fucking Weasel fucking tackle Cersei and was like biting chunks of flesh off of her, and then you have Phosphorus like burning her face. It was like, Jesus, criminy Christmas. And it also is making me feel like, like Cersei I don't think is going to end up being the main villain of the series after all. Like the way this episode ended, it ended with Cersei being like, you fools, the world is doomed now. And I'm like, okay, so Cersei, at least in her mind, she's doing something heroic by killing the queen. So it's kind of seeming like I think the princess is probably going to end up being a villain of some kind. I think, at least that's what the end of this episode is implying. I know there have been some theories. I've tried not to follow them too closely just because I don't know, I'm not like now that the show is coming out, like I don't watch the promos for future episodes. I don't watch those. But I have seen some people suggesting that the queen is going to end up being Clayface. I'm not entirely sure why people think that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now as well. I think that the queen is probably going to end up being a villain of some kind, which will be interesting. So we'll see. Really good episode. Still enjoying the show so far. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.